And it's true. Like, I wish everybody who's a school psychologist could have one day a week in private practice, because I think that they both really help each other. I mean, one of the reasons why I like being in the school still is because I get a variety of cases that I don't get in private practice, and I don't want to lose those skills. And I find that really fun and valuable. Working on some autism cases, for example, although I have gotten a lot more autism cases this year in my private practice, but for a long time, I wasn't really doing any autism evaluations in my private practice. So, that piece, working with students in severe mental health crises, just all the different variety that you get in a school setting that you don't necessarily get in a private practice.
Welcome to the Empower LEP Collaborative Podcast, a podcast to empower, inspire, and collaborate with aspiring and practicing licensed educational psychologists and like-minded professionals. We're your hosts, Jana Parker and Bethany Zoeller, bringing professionals together to talk business, private practice, and find inspiration from our community.
Well, welcome back to another episode of the Empower LEP Collaborative Podcast. I'm Bethany Zoeller.
I'm Jana Parker.
And today we have the honor of speaking with Miss Radha Richmond. How are you, Radha?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Good. So we are excited to have you on. I've never met you. Jana has, so you guys have some history together, but I am a newbie to you. So I want to know the story of your LEP practice, where you're located. Give me the history.
Sure, I'd be happy to. My practice is in Walnut Creek. That's my main office location, and it's called Cognitive Foundations. And I basically incorporated in 2019, actually in December of 2019. So right before the pandemic. But I had been working as a sole proprietor before that, since 2013 is when I actually got started, like on a part-time basis. But 2019 is when I jumped ship, went full in, and started, doing it full time. And then that's when I found out, I need to incorporate. So that's kind of the beginning of the actual official business, if you want to call it that. But I worked on it for a long time, slowly. So I wanted to kind of share that, because I know that I've listened to some of your previous podcast guests, and I think I'm the one, at least out of the people you've interviewed so far, that did it the slowest. And I thought that might be kind of helpful for some people to hear.
Were you working
about my journey?
Were you working full time while you did that slowly on the side?
Yep.
And you did it yourself, so you were sole proprietor and you did it yourself slowly.
Yep, I did it all by myself. So it's kind of a different perspective I can share. I'm in the East Bay. I actually live sort of on the Berkeley side of town. So what I did was I was working full time as a program specialist at a SELPA. And I had a colleague who was working with me who was starting his own LEP practice. And he got to a point where he had so much work that he said, "Hey, would you be interested in helping me as a subcontractor to do some testing?" And I said, "Sure, I would love to," because, I was fearful of losing my school psychology skills. I didn't want to lose those, even though I was an administrator. And I had sort of in the back of my mind, this back burner idea that I had generated when I was in grad school about having my own LEP practice. And that was something that I had as a goal, but then, life kind of throws you curveballs. And so I had gone in the administrative direction instead, but it was something that was sort of maybe I want to do that someday. So when he offered me the opportunity, I jumped on it. And at that time, he was doing evaluations from people's houses. So on Saturdays, and I had just had my son, so he was like a baby. So my husband and I would pack up my son, and we drive all over San Jose, Livermore, Sacramento, wherever it was on a Saturday. My husband would go with me so I wouldn't be away from my son too long, and also because I was still breastfeeding. So we'd go, they'd drop me off. I'd test for 3 or 4 hours, then they'd pick me up. Then we'd go eat and go to a park or something, and then go home. But anyways, I did that for, I don't know, maybe a year and a half, 2 years. And then that sort of gave me the courage, because I got the experience to do it on my own. And I thought, I could probably do this on my own. So I started a website on Wix.com. So shout out to them. I actually still have that website to this day. But I started that website, and that was kind of like my launching point. And then I scoured Craigslist. Craigslist is also my favorite, personally, at least back then, favorite place for information. And I found out through that, looking for office space, that, hey, who knew I could sublease an office from another psychologist? So I got an office space in Berkeley from a psychiatrist. And so I subleased a room from her first on Saturdays. And, I think it was like $150 a month or something like that for every Saturday. So it was really low input in terms of resources. And I started doing that. And I would get like one client, and then a few months would go by, and then I would get one client, and then a few months would go by, because really I started like some Google ads, because my colleague friend who was doing his own business had told me, like, that's how he started, and how he generated clients. But he said, oh, you can set it like for as much as you want to spend, and so I didn't want to spend a lot. So I think I set my budget per month for like $50.
Yeah.
So I got like one client, and then a couple months ago I got one client, and so I did that for a number of years. Because I was an administrator, I was full-time, I had a baby, I was also teaching at St. Mary's. So it was a lot. I was doing a lot. And I wasn't really like sure what I wanted to do. I was just kind of dabbling in it. And then the psychiatrist that I was subleasing space from, after I think about 2 years, she actually moved out of the area. So I had to find a new space. So then I found a new subleasing space, and I moved over to Kensington, which is a little like neighborhood over by Berkeley. And I subleased a spot from a counselor, like an MFT there. And I did that for about a year, or I don't even know how long. It's all like blending together now. And then I found out about a more like formal space where they were actually specializing in providing sort of hourly rental type of space for therapists.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
And I said, oh, this would be even better, because it was, the setup was a little bit less like personal to the other, to the person I was subleasing from. Like, it was more just like a professional office, but they had sound machines and all of that. So I ended up switching to that. And then I did that for a long time, until I don't know, about maybe 2 years ago, when I got my own full-time office. But yeah.
Okay, so
I know I'm kind of going on, sorry.
No, it's all good. How much time were you are you still part-time? No,
No, I'm full-time. So from 2013 to 2019, I was part-time.
Okay.
Then in 2019, I quit my job and I went full-time. So in August of that year of 2019, and then I didn't incorporate until December of that year. But I was full-time at that point, but I didn't have a full-time office space, because I did part contract school psychology work and part private practice and IEEs. So, and that's what I still do to this day. So I do kind of all three, but I didn't get a full-time office until, about 2 years after that.
Okay. So when you incorporated, did you have a full-time workload at that point, or did it take a little while? Okay. So while you were working part-time, you were able to grow it until you felt confident.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I got lucky, because I was approached by a group of individuals who had a contract with a school district to provide school-based evaluations.
Mm-hmm.
And the nice thing about that, this was in 2016, I think. The nice thing about that was, it was basically like, you can do as many as you want or as little as you want. Just tell us how many you want a month, and we'll give them to you. So it was, so it allowed me the opportunity. I did that part-time for a long time. And then I eventually said, okay, this seems like it's solid. I want to go out on my own. Plus I was still working on building up my private clientele. through word of mouth, which obviously takes a lot longer.
Right.
I mean, I think that's the slowest part of the process, is getting that word of mouth through parents, through the private side. So I wasn't quite like ready to go out and just do school-based evaluations, because I wanted to have my private practice and my private clientele built up as well. So that's kind of why. And also, I really love my job. So I really love my job as a program specialist. And that was something else that kind of kept me hanging on for a long time, was I really enjoyed it. And I wasn't really in a rush to go anywhere.
So what was the final reason to go? Like what led you over? Oh, okay.
I got so busy that I was trying to do everything, and it started to drive me a little crazy, where I was like I was waking up in the middle of the night with like anxiety attacks and stuff, because my to-do list was so long. And I've never been that kind of person. I'm usually a very sound sleeper. And I said to myself, you know what? This is not a good sign. You're giving yourself a mental health issue because you have way too much on your plate. You need to do something about this. So that's what I did. I was like, okay, I got to bite the bullet. I either have to go all in, or I need to push some stuff back. I can't do everything. I can't work 2 full-time jobs basically at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. And you teach.
Yeah, I actually, so one of the things I've been working on is actually taking stuff off my plate, because just like you guys, I think, said in one of your podcasts, like, you're the type of people that do everything, right? Yeah, we all, yes, we're all like that. But I've been trying to offload stuff. So I haven't taught at St. Mary's. I mean, I'm still on the faculty, but I haven't taught there in about a year. I've taken some time off. I got a little burnout from, well, the pandemic and teaching online, and just, I was like, I need to just focus on one thing for a while. So it's been good. It's been really good. Yeah. Feels good.
So the next question I'm supposed to ask you is what led to you launching your LEP business. But you said in grad school, you heard about LEP and you were like, that's what I want to do. Why? Like, tell me about that. Like, how did you?
Yeah. So one of my professors, was an LEP, and she was telling us, she worked as a school psychologist full time, but she was starting her, doing her own LEP business on the side. And she was just sharing it with us one day in class, about what she was doing and how she had started this. And I was just like immediately like so excited. I was like, ding, 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 ding. And I was on fire. I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I want to do. I want to do that so bad. And I remember, it's so funny, if you ask some of my classmates, they'll probably still remember this. I would like doodle, and I would write out like different business names. And at the time I was like, 2 of my friends, I'm like, we're going to go into it together. Yeah. And so I'd put like our last names, and I'd pretend like I'd flip them around. Which one should we put first and stuff like that. And
it was like a girl with a crush in middle school. Like you're drawing the hearts around it in your notebook.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
It was it was like an immediate, like exciting prospect and idea that I really, really, really wanted to do. So
that's so cool. I didn't know about it as a grad student. I don't think I heard about it until I'd been a school psych for like 5 years. And then somebody said it to me and I was like, what is that? So I know. Awesome. Yeah.
It was funny because I knew about it, but then I didn't really know what to do, because back then we didn't really know what to do. So like, I just knew in 3 years time, after I've gotten my school psych credential, I can go get my LEP license. So the very like day, I had it like on my calendar, like on this day you can go take the LEP exam. So I did, like literally 3 years, boom, done.
I did the same thing. I did it too.
Did you really?
Yeah, I was like so on fire about it. And then I just did nothing with it for a while after that. I was like, okay, well, that was exciting, but now what?
You did it. You did it. So within your school psych practice and your LEP practice, where would you say your passion lies? Like, what are those things that as a school psych and now as an LEP that like keep you going and motivate you?
Yeah, I think it's the people. I really enjoy each and every person that I work with. I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but it's actually true. Like, I love working with adults. I love working with kids. I love working with kids of all ages. I'm fascinated by the people, their stories, their personalities, I just like getting to know them. I like spending time with them. I love spending time with kids, adults, everybody. It's just, that's the part that really is fun for me. I mean, I love assessment. I mean, that's what I do. I only do assessment. I don't do counseling. but it's really just those interactions, figuring out the puzzle, and then, trying to be of some sort of service, and help. I pride myself on trying to be extremely like ethical and fair and upholding like all the principles that we were taught, in terms of my evaluations. And even when I do IEEs, I'm very, very, I only take on clients that I feel like I can be fair with in terms of what their expectations are for the outcomes of the evaluation. And then I can, say what I believe, and they're going to accept that and be okay with that, whatever that outcome is. Yeah. So I'm a little picky with my IEE clients. But yeah, that's the whole purpose of it, and then connecting people to resources. And with adults, I mean, I love working with adults, college students or adults in general. It's such a different experience. And a lot of it for them is so groundbreaking in terms of identity, questions they've had their whole entire life. It can be really emotional, and, kind of like a huge breakthrough for them. And I find that to be really, really, just, I don't know, it's emotional for me too. Like I'll get like teary eyed when I'm talking to them, when they're teary eyed and stuff, I can't help it. It's just a really neat experience to be able to give somebody an answer to a question that they had, or to be like, so that's what it was, my whole life I struggled with that and I didn't know. I think it's just so, amazing to be able to do that. So that's my passion.
Oh, go ahead, Jana.
Do you find that that's a different feeling than you had when you were a school psychologist? Like,
yes.
What's the difference? Yeah.
I do. When I was a school psychologist, so I did my internship in a very like litigious district, and I had a lot of good supervision and a lot of support in that way. But then when I was a school psychologist, I went and worked for a county office of education. So I had a really varied, caseload. I worked with the deaf and hard of hearing population. We had a K-12 magnet program. And then we also had a juvenile hall, and I worked there. And then I worked with severe, students, with intellectual disabilities and also autism.
Yeah.
So yeah, the connection with the client or the student, is different depending on, what the goal of the evaluation is. And working with the families, I felt like, at least for me back then, I was kind of intimidated by parents especially because of my internship experience where it was such a litigious district. It was kind of like, we don't like,
Yeah.
So I was I think I kind of like put up a barrier in a way from like with myself, which is interesting now doing school-based evaluations, working with private clients. I'm completely different when I work in the school now. I'm like, I love talking to parents and I want to get their input. And I'm like, yeah, and there's no barriers. Like this whole fear factor or intimidation factor is completely gone. And I'm so glad I went through that to see that difference or have that difference. But back then I was scared. So I think that definitely had an impact on me. But then at the same time, I really loved working like on behavioral challenges and being a part of that process of supporting students and seeing like their growth, especially students who had moderate to severe disabilities, seeing their growth, the power of like programming and curriculum and teacher training and methodology and stuff that got seared into my brain too. Like, wow, you can make such a difference and have such a different outcome for a child if people have proper training. And so that got me really passionate about that side of things. And then at the juvenile hall, I loved working with those students because it was such a vulnerable population, and a lot of students in juvenile hall don't have undocumented disabilities that have kind of contributed to some of the outcomes in their life. And I'm really passionate about that. And so what we did was we tried to like clean up the whole system, that was that we had control over, and provide more evaluations and stuff like that. So that was really, I was really passionate about that. But it just depends on like your setting and kind of like, what you can get involved in.
I love how you are just talking about how you started off slow. You got this experience kind of working alongside someone else. You got this level of comfort, and then it helped like your confidence, and also just having this other experience when you went back into the schools, you felt more confident with parents and you kind of approached it in a different way. And I always will say, like, working part-time as an LEP, getting my feet wet like that, being not under, but like working on a team there too, right? So that I had some like guidance, and being able to have the conversations with the families in the private sector, it did like give me so much more confidence, and it elevated my practice as a school psychologist because I got to see the other side and like how much parents don't know about the whole process. And just by giving them information and like telling them about what the process is and what to expect, and kind of like giving information away, and really like listening and feeling when parents don't feel like you have an agenda, right? Because as a school psychologist, I think they always thought we had an agenda, kind of did, but didn't, it was like we always did have some kind of barrier. But I think you're kind of speaking like the same kind of language, right? Like you felt like you could bring this new experience that you had back to the schools, and it made you a better school psychologist.
They really do work together in tandem. And it's true. Like, I wish everybody who's a school psychologist could have one day a week in private practice, because I think that they both really help each other. I mean, one of the reasons why I like being in the schools still is because I get a variety of cases that I don't get in private practice, and I don't want to lose those skills. And I find that really fun and valuable. Working on some autism cases, for example, although I have gotten a lot more autism cases this year in my private practice, but for a long time, I wasn't really doing any autism evaluations in my private practice. So, that piece, just, working with students in severe mental health crises, just all the different variety that you get in a school setting that you don't necessarily get in a private practice. And then being able to work with different socioeconomic groups, I think is really important. That's something that I have struggled with, and I'm still trying to figure out. I want to be able to provide greater access to families. It is, it's expensive. Private evaluations are expensive. And if you're private pay, there's not a lot of access. I know there are private, individuals out there who can access it through their insurance, but I've been a part of this organization called Open Path, which allows, it's pretty much designed for therapy, but it's basically where you join and you say, I will provide services to a family at a lower cost so that they can access the services. It's a kind of like a collective where you just are doing it because you want to give back and you want to provide that. So I do that as an evaluation, and I charge like dramatically less. And I try to do that, like depending on, I don't get people from there all the time, but if I get somebody, I'll do it. I'll take them.
That's awesome. I didn't even know that was a thing, but I'm right there with you. I have such a hard time. I think because my school psychology practice was in very rural, low socioeconomic status schools. And then, I started private practice, and now I can't serve those people because they can't afford me. And I'm like, I wrestle with that as well. I've actually done like pro bono type cases before, but and then you also, you have to pay your own bills now in this setting. So you can't give away your time. But I feel
it's hard. It's so hard. And I'm right there with you, because I thought about that too. Like, should I do one, pro bono a month? Should I do this? Should I do that? It's hard. It's really hard, especially when, you have a lot of things you're juggling, and time is so valuable and so precious at this point. But yeah, so that's another reason why I like, still stay in the schools, is that variety and that access to those different experiences, which I find are really, I enjoy them. I like variety. I mean, that's one of the reasons I think why I like this, is because I like variety.
So how much of your overall business comes from schools versus the more private practice side?
It depends. And that's one thing that's so fun about having your own business too, is I feel like it's always changing and ebbing and flowing and fluctuating. So like last year I did hardly any school evaluations. I would say about 90% of my work was private practice. But then the year before that, which was, let's see, this is 24, 23, 22 was crazy. That was like when a lot of stuff opened up from the pandemic. So I had a bazillion school-based evaluations, especially that spring of 22.
Yep.
And then the year before that, it was a little bit, fluctuating because of the pandemic and stuff. So it just really varies. And then it could be, the spring is always like my busiest time. I've been trying to track, like, what's my busiest time? What's my quietest time? Just to get a sense of the workflow, because I've only been doing, this full time since 2019. So I'm still getting that down, but definitely the spring is crazy. And the fall is usually a little bit quieter.
I usually
trying to get
have a
this down,
spike
it's
like
hard to take breaks.
October, September,
Yeah.
October. I have a not as high of a spike as like right now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Right now it's crazy. But it's like, as a private practice person and self-employed, you have to figure out how to take vacation or how to take breaks. And so trying to track like the ebb and flow so that I'm not trying to take a break in the middle of like this crazy busy time and then realize, hey, October is slower. So why don't you just kind of bank on having a bunch of time off then? And I'm trying to still figure that out. But I think that's really important.
Yeah.
For us to know, so that we do get some time off.
Right. Yeah. You kind of have to tuck away on those high, financial months where we have money flowing better to kind of cover. Yeah. It's something you didn't have to think about when you just,
No, you didn't. Exactly. And then you kind of kill yourself off a little bit and then you recover.
Yeah. So let's talk clients. And so it sounds like you had really a hand in, like, someone walked you through getting those school district contracts. And then you did Google ads for your private practice. Have you done other things to kind of network or get your name out there? Or has that been the primary?
No, I have not. Okay. I have never done any networking. I have not used anything but Google ads, which is a low budget. And then it's just kind of all just flowed to me, which has been really a blessing. I know that I need to do more networking and I feel so horrible. I'll get people who contact me and they're like, hey, hi, I'm so-and-so. And, do you want to have lunch? And I'm like, yeah. And then I'm so busy. I'm like, I forgot. I forgot to
sound like you need to network. You sounds like you have plenty of referrals coming in.
But I want to. I mean, I want to. I think that's really valuable. And now I'm kind of getting to a point where, especially in my private practice, people want, and I find this is hard. I don't know if you guys find this hard people want like specific referrals for such and such intervention. And, I find that challenging to meet because even if I do know that so-and-so is a good person and blah, 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 how do I know if they have any availability? And then if they don't have availability, how do I have a second person or a third person to, and I haven't seen them actually do their work, which like in a school, you kind of know like so-and-so's a good teacher and, you get to see their practice or whatever. But so I'm finding that is something that I need to invest more time in to be able to really like hand somebody off. It's not enough just to say you need this methodology.
Yeah.
Right.
I try to do that a lot but it is very, I do it a lot. It's very time consuming. I like knowing who, I like knowing people so that I do feel like I at least have met them. So like I can vet them in that way, but it does take a lot of time. But I also like in my practice, I really am going for more private pay, like we do IEEs, but we don't do school contracts usually. So we're mostly private pay. And so then it's really critical because that's critical. But I can see, if it's just you and you're doing a lot of stuff with schools and IEEs and then some private pay and it is just you, then it is really hard to get out. I can't imagine.
How do you get your IEE referrals?
I don't know. I just suddenly, like you, I think you just suddenly started getting called.
Yep.
yeah, I started getting called. And then it just keeps expanding. Like like I just got a thing from somewhere down in LA County, and they're like, "Do we want to put you on the IES?" I'm like, "What?
I think
LA?"
I thought that too. I was like, you're in LA.
Yeah. Okay. But it's always good to be on a list, although that can backfire too. I mean, a lot of parents don't want you if you're on a list because they think that means you're in the cahoots with the school district, which, by the way, if any parents are listening to us, that's not true.
We just lost one because of that. We just which would have been really difficult anyway because there was a language barrier, but the parent, found out we were on the SELPA list, and then they were like, oh, well, we don't want, well, then they must be in with the SELPA. No, that is not. No, we just have said to the SELPA, hey, we're available. And they vetted us, and now we're on the list.
We have the right credentials. We have the insurance they require. That's about it. I don't personally have network meetings with district people or anything like that. I mean, of course I was in a SELPA for a long time, and we had 16 districts in our SELPA. So I do know a lot of directors and SELPA directors and stuff like that. But since I quit my job, I haven't talked to any of them. So, on a regular basis. So it's not like that's what's driving it or anything. I mean, I don't know. But yeah, it's I don't do a ton of IEs. I do, I'd say like 10 or so a year, maybe. Not a ton, because I think you guys mentioned this already too. Like, you kind of have, it's an interesting position to be in. Let's just put it that way.
I love them. I love IEs. They're like my favorite thing to do because
really?
of that piece that you kind of mentioned earlier about that connection with you get to be the kind of middle ground and help explain things and help, you're not the bad guy anymore.
No, you're not. Yeah.
Right. And so I really enjoy them. I feel like I can help. I have one thing I do have a hard time with though, is I tend to put on an advocate hat. And that's hard for me to not just be like, better than that, which sometimes I just do it. But yeah, but no, I love IEs. There was something I wanted to ask you, and now it has gone from my head. Oh, you mentioned earlier that you work with adults. What do you do with adults? What's your adult jam?
I do evaluations. So for people who are in college or people who want to go back to college or graduate school and need accommodations at school or on exams. So MCAT, LSAT, GRE, that's the term. GRE, LSAT, all of those. So I've also sometimes from that testing, it stems into or flows into like writing a letter for their employer, like, hey, they might need these work-based accommodations. But typically the referral is that they're trying to do something, with graduate school or college. So yeah, that part is really fun. It's, especially because it can be like the night and day, like between being successful in school or not, meeting a goal that they've had for themselves or not. And so that's been really fun. And I like to get the feedback from, those individuals. And it's fun. Like sometimes they will contact me back and say, hey, I was able to get all A's in my graduate program because of the accommodations I got, or they'll tell me I finally passed the bar exam or whatever it is, and like after they've tried like 4 or 5 times and stuff. So that's really fun. And very.
Did you take any, this is the thing, when I've done them, I don't feel like super confident in is like, how do you know the accommodations that are appropriate for that specific test or that program? I'm afraid that I do ones that I know of, but I'm like, is there a resource out there so that what you can suggest, or how did you figure that out?
Well, at least for the exams, there is a page, like a resource page for each exam for the person who's doing the evaluation. And they, pretty much like it's a little handbook, like you have to do these tests, you have to do this, you have to say how it affects them. It has, it's kind of like the 504 eligibility piece about substantial life impact. that sort of thing. And then they want like certain terminology in there. And then, so I've done that. I've gotten feedback from people like, so there was one person who came back to me and was like, I only got 30% extra time and I wanted 100% extra time. But in my defense, I told her, hey, you're not going to get 100% extra time. I know that's what you want, but the data doesn't show that you need that. But yeah, so, and she was like, I really want to ask for it. So she came back, and it's great because I get to see the letter and see like why they denied it. So I just filed that information away like for the next time.
What did they say? Like, how did they make a determination that it was 30%, not 100%?
It was because of the data, because the data didn't show that there was like a severe need. And also, I mean, this, not to get too much into it, but she had a diagnosis of an attention disorder from another individual, from a medical doctor. And so I didn't go into a lot of depth with that because I'm like, she already has it from like a year ago. So I just put my history. And then they said, well, you didn't really document that, like what impact this is actually having on her to need extra time. So for the learning challenges, we'll give her this much because she had like reading comprehension difficulties. But for the attention, you didn't. And so I didn't know that I had to do that because I'm thinking she has a diagnosis from this other place and she had, documentation, but there wasn't testing done. So then I went back and I did some more testing for her in the attention and executive functioning sections. And then we resubmitted because I hadn't really done that area. So I thought it was kind of done. So it's interesting, like, and that's one thing that was valuable for me to understand was it's not enough just to have a diagnosis. Like that's why people end up having to contact people like us, because even if they go to Kaiser or wherever and they get that ADHD diagnosis, if there's no testing that's done and test scores, they're not going to get any accommodations. I mean, they will at the college level, but not for these exams.
Yeah.
So, so it's just been kind of like a trial and error process. And that's why I always tell everyone that I do that with, like, tell me what they said, tell me how it goes. I want to know the feedback so that I can either help you or I can, at least tuck that away in my mind for next time. So, and then like the testing psychologist, that podcast, all the resources on there, there's a lot of clinical psychologists on there that do that on a regular basis. And they go into some detail and I'll scour that for information, so that's been helpful too.
That's such a good resource. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. I just feel like I'm a lurker on like the Facebook side of it. Like I don't ever post, but I'm like on there and searching things all the time. Like, what do I do here? Yeah.
Yeah, I love all their information.
Nice. Yeah. Jana, did you have any other questions for Ms. Radha? Okay, then I'm going to ask. Oh, wait, did you have any products or training that you wanted to promote?
No.
No. Okay. Then I'm going to jump into our final question, which is if you could go back to the Radha of, I don't know how many years ago, the 2013 Radha, and give her some advice or encouragement on her path, what would it be?
I don't know. I don't know that I would do anything any differently. Because it was all a part of the learning process. I think that one thing that I would probably do is I'd probably network a little bit more so that, because what I did was I kind of like found someone as my mentor from afar and I would just sort of follow them without them knowing that I was following them, without them knowing they were my mentor. And then I would kind of like, figure it out from there. And then, okay, I've reached that level. Now I need a new mentor and I'd find someone else and follow them from afar. So I still do that. It's really helpful. So, you definitely need sort of a roadmap. And that's why something like this is so valuable compared to back when I was starting, there was nothing like this. So you definitely need a roadmap, but it helps to just have conversations and talk to people. So that's the networking piece. I definitely did that in a sense, but not as much as I could have. But I have to give myself some grace. I had a lot that I was juggling.
You did.
So you just have to do the best that you can do and know that you're going to learn and grow and change over time. And you're going to progress. You're going to get better. And it's okay. Like, you don't have to put so much pressure on yourself to be perfect from the start or to get everything exactly right, and you can build it as you fly the plane if that's what you want to do. It's a little bit harder. But there's space and time for that as well. That's definitely what I did. And you can always like go back and revamp things as you move along and as you learn, and that's definitely what I've done too. And I'm just one of those people, like whenever I see something that I like or something that I've seen done with excellence, I'm like, oh, and then,
Right.
that kind of gets me fired up to make some changes. It's kind of like when you go into a new house, you're like, oh, I want to redecorate my house. It's like that same thing. It gets you inspired to make those changes. So I think that a lot of people put a lot of pressure on themselves to have it all figured out or to have all their ducks in a row before they start. I'm definitely somebody like that. And then, for people like me who didn't have a safety net to fall back on, or, I had to be cautious financially because of that. It was a big risk for me. I didn't have anything that was really helping me in that regard. So I had to just be careful. And, if you are in that same boat as I was, just know that like all of your effort is going to build upon itself. And it might seem slow at first and it might be a little bit discouraging, but you actually are doing something, and it is, you are making that progress that you may not be able to see. And all of a sudden it just kind of like hits. And then like, whoa, that 2 years where I was toiling along and I had one client here and then 3 months and then one client there, it all matters. It makes a difference, and it is for something.
Yeah.
So don't give up. Don't get discouraged. Just keep going,
And I like you said, that perfectionism and that kind of expecting to be out the gate perfect and have a full caseload. I think that your experience, Radha, is like the typical that we should be expecting. And so we've met people on this podcast that just like launched right in, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, I can't. And they're making it work.
Yep.
But I think that truly, like, your experience is, it's the same as mine. As when we start out, you're getting those first couple of calls and you're so excited that your phone rang. Like, oh my gosh,
yeah.
So no, I love your advice. And I think that that's going to be an encouragement to a lot of people that are getting started in this journey. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show and telling us about you and your practice. And it's been great.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'm glad I could share a little bit. Hopefully it helps somebody out there who's in the same boat or thinking about, starting their own practice.
And you totally get credit for networking today. So
yeah, networked.
Check it out. And whoever listens to this, you network with them too. So like, you've probably reached your quota.
But let me just say this, okay? If anyone ever reaches out to me and wants help or anything, I'm 100% there. Like, I always help everybody. That's not the thing. It's just the like, let's network and have lunch and see. I'm like, yeah, I want to. In my mind, I want to. But when people like email me like, hey, I need help with this or that, no, I always do that. So that's a different kind of networking. But yeah. We just do the best that we can do.
Yeah. That's it. And you know what? I think that when we live in the world that the three of us are in, that time for lunch is very valuable. And it's not that networking isn't, it's just like, we have to be picky, like, what with the energy that I have, what do I want to pour it into? So.
Yeah. And my goal is to be like available when my son gets home from school and to be mentally free. And so, that does change things. And now that he's getting older, I feel more of that like relief kind of not having to be on for that as much. So I am finding myself like working a little bit later, or like giving myself that space as a mom to also like be like, no, this is also important. And I think a lot of times it was like, as soon as he was available, like, boom, shut it off, done. Even if I had like leftover stuff and then I'd have to remember it the next day, where was I at? And now I'm like giving myself the grace of like, no, it's okay. I can finish this up. I can wrap, I can, so that those pieces are easier to follow the next day. And so that I am, not feeling so pulled in so many different directions. So, that's the added extra, like, piece is
Awesome.
parenthood.
Yes. Yeah. And that definitely is a heavy extra piece to that puzzle. So,
Yeah.
well, I'm going to wrap this episode up, but thank you so much for being here, Radha, and for telling us about your journey. And we will see you next time on the Empower LEP Collaborative Podcast. Bye.
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 Thank you for listening to the Empower LEP Collaborative Podcast. Episodes can be found at empowerlepcollaborative.com. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast player. If you'd like to be a guest on our show, or if you have any questions for us, don't hesitate to connect. We would love to learn more. Jana can be found at jana@empowerlep.com, and Bethany can be reached at bethany@lepcollaborative.com.